Joining me now to share his insights is Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and the president of KIP, a strategic risk management firm. Hal, good to have you with us. Hal, clearly Russia anticipates criticism from the U.S. and NATO allies when it undertakes a move like this. It still went ahead and did it. So what does this indicate? I mean, it seems like Putin is testing boundaries here.
Michelle, that's exactly right. He's seeing how far he can go. The Kerch Strait is absolutely vital to the economic well-being of the Ukraine. 80% of their exports go through the Kerch Strait. That strait, not only under international maritime law, UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, but also in a separate treaty between the Ukraine and Russia, the Ukrainian Navy and Ukrainian ships have the right of free passage. So it's a very provocative move, and firing on these ships in international waters that's how wars get started, and that's what everybody's afraid that this conflict could escalate to the next level, where it is literally nation-state on nation-state warfare.
So what should the response be here, Hal, from the U.S. and NATO allies? They've clearly strongly backed President Poroshenko, but what can they do to influence Russian behavior? There'll be talk of more economic sanctions, but Russia is already heavily sanctioned, and clearly this has not encouraged Russia to rethink its annexation of Crimea and its further action. So what should the U.S. and NATO allies do about all of this?
Well, you're going to see us looking across everywhere we have any level of engagement with Russia. I imagine even some of the things going on in Syria may be looked at a little bit differently because of what's happening. There are still some things within the kit bag of sanctions that we could still impose. There's a lot of things we could do on the financial side, which we haven't done yet, which could put a lot of pressure on Russia. And part of it is building a really common cause with all the NATO allies. If we do it alone, it's not going to have that much effect. But if all the NATO allies were to step in with a common purpose, that could have an impact, particularly in areas dealing with trade, oil, and financial instruments.
How the Trump administration, even before this episode, was already considering calls to sell additional weaponry to Ukraine, in addition to the Javelin anti-tank missiles that have already been supplied to the country. Is this a good way to proceed, or does weaponizing Ukraine further risk tipping this conflict into a full-scale war?
Well, from Russia's standpoint, and certainly the way that they would explain it, they say sending weapons in there or into the Ukraine is simply causing more death, destruction, and enhancing the possibility of this turning into a larger war. The other side is Russia has all the advantage. Their naval forces dwarf the Ukrainian forces. They have all the land force advantage. So giving weapons, particularly things like Javelin anti-tank missiles, which is really more of a defensive system, if you want to look at that, that's pretty consistent with our approach on this. But I think you're going to see a lot of pressure in Congress and elsewhere to actually increase the amount of arms and other types of aid that we're providing to the Ukraine and the Ukrainian military.
And of course, the balance is, as I said, to make sure that that doesn't actually lead to a full-scale war. And hell, some are questioning to what degree the U.S. should be involved in this. They're favoring a more isolationist policy. They're questioning whether this actually benefits the U.S. to get too involved here. Is the question, though, how does it hurt the U.S. to not take on this fight?
I think if we don't take on this fight, if we don't get more involved, there's going to be countries around the world that are going to question our commitments there. You look at the Baltic states. They're watching very, very closely what's happening with the Ukraine, because if we don't, now keep in mind the Ukraine is not a NATO country, but still, if we don't put pressure on Russia and provide support for the Ukraine, their concern is, okay, so if the Ukraine falls and Russia is on our board, putting more pressure on us, are we going to stand by Article 5 with NATO? Are we going to do what we have to do? That's a big question. And that's just Europe, but also elsewhere around the world. Our Asian allies are looking at this. Allies we have everywhere are looking at what are we doing in the Ukraine. So I'm not saying our hands are tied, but we can't really walk away.
Right. What about accusations that this is a ploy by Ukraine as the elections come up, that it's a wag the tail type of scenario, getting Poroshenko reelected?
Well, the timing is
Wag the
kind of
dog,
interesting. Yeah, the timing's very interesting with the March elections, and I can't say that isn't may have a little bit to do with it. See, I don't know the exact position of the ships within the Kerch Strait, and I don't know if those ships may have been a little too close to Russian waters, maybe kind of pushing to see how far they could go as well. It looked to me like they were in the middle of the strait, but we'll find out. There could be some of that in the background. That's not impossible.
Hal, always good to have you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Michelle.